Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today we'll be heading over to the Sun Belt Conference to take a look at the Trojans of Troy, who finished 4-8 last season. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their T-Day game on April 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the sports editor and the Troy beat reporter for the Troy Messenger. He is a pro wrestling aficionado. Some may call him the final boss. He is Josh Boutwell. Josh can be found at Josh Messenger on X. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you guys.
Well, for those who are just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Troy football?
I am born and raised in South Alabama. I have been covering Troy since 2016. I've been with the Troy Messenger since 2022. I was at the Southeast Sun from 2016 until 2022. I covered Troy there as well.
Well, moving over to the Troy football team, for those not familiar with Troy's offensive style, how would you describe it?
Multi. That would be the best thing. I think this year you're probably gonna see a lot more under center, maybe a little bit more. They definitely want to establish the run, which is going to be tough when you lose your 1,000-yard back, but there's some weapons outside, and having Goose Crowder back at quarterback is going to really help with that. We're definitely going to see them spread the ball out at the same time. So it's just multiple is the best way I could describe it.
Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Last season, the Trojans saw starter Goose Crowder missed most of the season with injuries, but it did allow Matthew Caldwell to gain some valuable experience. Unfortunately, they recently lost Caldwell to the transfer portal, but they do return Crowder and Tucker Kilcrease. How did this quarterback room look in the spring?
Goose looked really good. From the outside looking in, you couldn't see any effects from the head injury is what they called it. And he looked very excited to be back on the field, complete control of the offense, which you want to see from that position. And Tucker's improving every year since he's been here. He started to improve. I think his arm's improving. He's probably got the best mobility out of anybody left, at least in the quarterback room. We got to see a little bit more from him with the deep ball, which is something we really didn't see at all in the last couple of years. But having Crowder back is massive, and then obviously the big key thing will be keeping him healthy.
So for those not familiar with Goose's play style, how would you describe it?
He's definitely not a statue. He can move a little bit, especially in the pocket. I'd say a gunslinger would be probably one of the better ways to describe him. He loves to go deep. But he's in control of himself. He's not going to be reckless with the football. He's a guy that if the defense is trying to take away that deep ball, he has no problem checking them down. Like I said, he's not. I wouldn't call him a mobile quarterback per se, but he's not a statue. He can move around some.
If I'm remembering right, didn't he maybe get his first bang up because he was mobile and he maybe dove into the end zone or the corner of the pylon, and I don't know if it was the left or right shoulder kind of looked like.
He dove it in the end zone against Memphis, and he hurt his shoulder the first time. And I think I want to say the first quarter where he came back is when he had the second injury.
Well, moving over to that running game, and as you mentioned, they recently took a big hit with leading rusher from a year ago, Damian Taylor, entering the transfer portal. They also lose Gerald Green to graduation. Between those two, they lose 94% of their running back production from 2024. But while the portal take, it also gives, and the Trojans land a commitment from Georgia Tech running back Trey Cooley. Cooley will join a room that returns Jordan Lovett, Jarvis Williams, and Tay Meadows, who was recently placed on scholarship. For the players that were there and remained during the spring, how did they look?
I think one of the solid things for that group is that Damian Taylor actually was held out a lot during spring. It wasn't anything, injury wise for him. It was just, some certain players during spring, they kind of hold out to keep them from getting injured. So the guys like Jordan Lovett and Jarvis Williams really got a lot of touches that they need. Lovett's a guy that I kind of feel like could be a guy that kind of explodes this year. He's someone that not just a good runner, but he's a good receiver out of the backfield. He's very fast. He's got good size. A hit that maybe we aren't talking about as much right now, Jamontez Woods was another guy that hit the portal. He's a guy that was here at Troy before, and I think he ran for something like 800 yards during his career at Troy before he transferred to West Florida. And he came back before the spring to Troy, and with Damian leaving, he would have been really the only one with any experience playing, but he hit the portal too. So that's a big concern. There is definitely experience in that backfield.
Well, with the addition of Cooley, do you expect them to kind of like last year was kind of really a 1-2 punch with Gerald Green and Damian Taylor? Do you think we're going to see a 1-2 punch again? Do you think it's going to be spread out among even more backs, or what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a running back by committee for sure, especially because when you have a guy like Jordan Lovett where you can actually maybe get on the field with another back and kind of use that a little bit. And I kind of feel like for sure we're probably going to see them go to the portal for at least one more player in that backfield.
Of the players that are there now, how do you think their skills will be best utilized in that running back room?
Tay Meadows and Jarvis Williams are really between the tackle stops, downhill runners. And like I said, Jordan Lovett's kind of your home run hitter. He's very fast. He can catch out of the backfield. And it seems like Cooley, just by watching some of his film, it seems like he's more of the all-around back.
If you had to guess today on, I guess it's April 30th, who do you think gets that first carry against Nichols?
That's a hard one. I'm going to say Jordan Lovett, just based on him being here for a while and just seeing what he did during the spring.
Well, let's turn our attention over to the wide receiver room. The room lost 3 guys who accounted for 185 targets, 1,600 yards receiving, and 11 touchdowns in 2024. The big losses are Landon Parker and Zariah Beeson to graduation, while all-conference first-teamer Devontae Ross is off to Penn State. This room is highlighted by the return of their second leading receiver in 2024, Peyton Higgins, but they also return Marquez Mojo Dortch, Roman Mothershed, DJ Epps, and promising redshirt freshman Juwan Boyd. From the transfer portal, they added Troy Taylor from Coastal Carolina, Tate from Delaware State before the spring, and they recently added Ra Thomas from Georgia and Mississippi State. How did this group look in the spring?
Really good. Obviously, I've talked about this the last few years. When you see, I want to say maybe date back 4 years or 3 years at least, Tez Johnson, Jabri Barber, and now Devontae Ross losing your number one receiver, 1,000 receivers every year. I mean, that's so hard to replace. They have been able to do it every year so far. So it'll be interesting to see that. But the guy that really stood out during the spring was a Roman Mothershed. He's a JUCO guy that came last year. But man, you notice him just looking. I mean, he's a big receiver. He's got great hands. He's very athletic, got good speed. He's one of the ones I'm really looking forward to seeing in the fall. But also Trey Taylor. He's one of the guys that several different players, when you ask who do you see maybe kind of having a breakout next year, he was one of the ones that several actually mentioned. And he's another guy that in practice, he's a smaller guy, but he's crazy speed. He's really fast. And then Juwan Boyd, he's a guy I've seen play since he was probably a sophomore in high school. He's from Charles Henderson there at Troy. One of the most gifted athletes I've ever had the chance to cover in high school, and I've covered guys like Marcus Jones in the past. So he's that type of athlete. He has played different spots in the spring. They played him at DB. They played him at running back. They played him at receiver. Receiver is definitely probably going to be his primary position, but him being a guy that can be sort of a a Swiss Army knife on the offense is going to be huge. I know there was at one point in the spring, just watching when they were doing one-on-ones, they just threw him out there with no warning, go play DB, and he played one of the top receivers. I won't say who it was, and he picked off the pass on that first play, and then he came back and they threw him in the slot on the next play, and he scored a touchdown. That's just the type of athlete he is. So I think Troy fans are going to love him.
Well, do you think you have seen somebody step up and be that potential wide receiver one for this team yet?
Roman Mothershed, I feel like he was the alpha for sure during spring.
And as I mentioned earlier, there's 185 targets that are vacant in 2020 from 2024. How do you see those targets getting divided up?
Oh, man. Well, Ra Thomas is a guy from Georgia that Troy signed during the spring. We haven't seen him yet, but I feel like that's gonna be huge to try and replace some of the targets. But I think Peyton Higgins, he's a great slot receiver. He'll definitely get his share, and I think Roman Mothershed, like I said before, he and Trey Taylor for sure will get plenty of their share as well. And then John Longboy, like I mentioned, that's one thing. Talent is not missing in this group. There's just not a ton of experience, and that's why a guy like Ra Thomas, I think, really adds to this group for sure.
If you were to describe how tight ends are utilized in this offense to someone that's never caught a Troy game, how would you describe it?
Multiple. I guess this is the same thing I'm going to do. They seem that really dating back to Neil Brown. They seem to have recruited multiple different types of tight ends. You have the blocking tight ends, but then also guys like Ethan Connor is more of a receiving tight end, honestly, just a gigantic receiver. Brody Dalton was the guy that was a really, really good blocker, and especially on the goal line, but he also could catch. So losing him, that's going to be tough. But if you can't block, you're not going to play. You're not going to be on the field at tight end for Troy.
Well, talking about the tight end personnel, as you mentioned, they suffered another big blow recently in the portal, losing the top tight end from 2024 and Brody Dalton. But they do return Ethan Connor, who redshirted in 2024, as well as Trey Swartz and Jackson Worley. How did the tight ends look in the spring? Did anyone stand out for you?
Ethan Connor has stood out since the minute he walked on campus at Troy. He's massive. He's a freak athlete. The biggest thing with him since he's got there has been his health. He's had several injuries. They've kind of knocked him out of being able to be on the field. But if he's healthy and on the field, he's a dangerous weapon because he's a guy you can move around, and you don't have to just put him in line on the line. And he's a guy that you can split out some if you need to. But outside of him, there's no experience whatsoever. Trey Swartz played a little bit last year, but losing Brody was huge. And I think that's another place that they'll probably try to reach out and to whether it's the JUCO or the transfer portal to try and get a little bit of depth there.
The offensive line seems to have fared pretty well, only losing two starters in Daniel King. He went to North Carolina, and then Boaz Stanley went to South Carolina. But everyone else returns, including starters Elijah Prather, Eli Russ, and Matt Henry. And there's a lot of returning depth behind them returning too. From the portal, they also bring in Vyson Lang from Tennessee, Patrick Screws Jr. from Georgia Tech, and Gardner Langio from App State. How did this group look to you in the spring?
Those guys are going to be dogs. That's why I feel like even with the lack of experience at running back, this is going to be something that helps because Paul Bowling is a guy that no one knows yet, but he's a freshman and he will start on the offensive line, in my opinion. It was easy to tell when you see these guys. Matt Henry, dog is the best way to describe it. He's a huge guy. And really, like you mentioned, the depth, that was one thing that really, really stood out to me in the spring because Vyson Lang and Patrick Screws Jr., another cool thing is those are local kids. Screws is from Eufaula. Lang is from right up the street in Montgomery at Pike Road. So it's cool to see those guys come back. And I feel like those aren't guys maybe that'll start day one, but I think those are guys both really young. And I feel like if as long as they stick with it, they're going to be big-time players there. And Eli Russ is a guy that switched between guard and center. I think guard is going to be where he really kind of becomes sort of an all-conference type of talent there. And then they got size is everywhere, and there's more freshmen coming in too during the summer. So I think this is probably as deep as we've seen. I mean, maybe even more so than when Summerall was here, which, those were some really good offensive lines too.
How do you see this line shaking out, given the depth and a couple of the guys that they brought in?
I would say I see Bolin being the center, Eli being one of the guards, and obviously for sure Matt Hendry being back at his spot, Prather being a tackle. The other tackle I think is the one that maybe we'll see kind of up in the air of a competition there.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
Roman Mothershed is the first name that pops into my head. I kind of want to say Goose just because we haven't seen him healthy. And I think if he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a really huge year. But those two names are the first ones that pop in my head.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And for those not familiar with Troy's defense, can you describe the style and scheme that they run there on D?
Yeah, they run it's a kind of a, I guess you would say 3-3-5, I guess. They have a bandit and a spear. The spear is a kind of a hybrid linebacker safety. The bandit is a hybrid outside backer, defensive end, so an edge or a jack and other defenses. Very physical, very deep. That's one thing that I think more than anything, the defense this year has a chance to be really, really, really good.
Well, let's move to the position rooms that will be running the defense for Coach Wright. And let's start up front with the guys along that defensive line. This group graduates Raymond Cutts. They also lost Philip Lee to Arkansas. That duo accounted for 4 sacks and 42 tackles. This room is highlighted by the return of Luis Medina on the inside. They also added Elijah Davis from South Carolina and Talik Robbins from Houston via the transfer portal. How did that unit look in the spring? Did anyone stand out?
Yeah, Luis Medina, and I think I've said this before, he's the alpha of that group, man. And you could tell the coaches kind of lean on him to be a leader. And then one guy I really get happy to see out there is Jamel Fils-Aime. He's from Enterprise, which is right up the street. And I've watched him since he was in junior high when he was at Enterprise, and I was over there covering them. So it's cool to see him out there, and I think he's a huge kid. He got to play a lot last year, but I think he's going to be a big-time player in that spot. The defensive end is going to be really cool to see how that shakes out. We got the kid for Jabril McNeil's good, but we have the kid from I believe South Carolina, Elijah Davis. He's one of those guys when he gets off the bus, you're like, okay, that's a football player. So it's gonna be fun to see him. And it's actually funny. I'm trying to like search in my head. I've talked to one of the Troy coaches during the spring and kind of asking about certain guys, and I kind of looked at it and I was like, man, all these new faces, like it's hard to keep track, and that's I guess kind of how college football is right now.
Absolutely. Well, who do you feel is the key cog in this room heading into 2025?
Luis Medina for sure. I think everything goes through him. He's a big run stopper. He's not a guy that's going to get 10 sacks in a year, but he's one of the guys that you kind of to not only fill gaps on the defensive line, but to be a leader in the locker room. I think so. Everything kind of goes through him.
Well, this linebacking group takes a hit in losing their third leading tackler, Brendan Jackson, to graduation, but the room returns the likes of leading tackler Jordan Stringer, Stephen Catledge, and their bandit, Jamal Williams. How did this group look in the spring to you?
Yeah, Jordan Stringer especially. It's going to be fun to watch them this year. He obviously had a good year last year, but he's really embracing kind of being a leader. That was one of the things they kind of preached about during the spring, and he really seems to kind of be embracing that. Another inside backer, Stephen Catledge. He's another one of those guys that I mentioned with Elijah Davis. When he walks off the bus, you're like, okay, We see. He's a JUCO All-American. He got to play some last year, but I feel like he's going to be a guy that really plays a lot this year in the inside. And Bandit's the position. You know, obviously they lost. They lost Philip Lee, who played mainly there at Bandit. He played also on defensive end, so. But that's probably the deepest maybe spot on the defense. There's some, again, I keep saying dogs. There's some dogs there. And Jamal Williams, man, he's so fast. He's got some size. Eric Shaw's another kid that he can play receiver. He's that athletic. He played safety before. He played receiver at South Carolina before he came to Troy. So it's going to be fun to see if he can stay healthy, what he'll be able to do. And then Donnie Williams is a JUCO guy that came during the spring, and he was one of the ones just watching. I thought he was another player because he's wearing a number 22. He's wearing a number that another player wore last year. And when they told me who it was, I was just like, whoa. I mean, he stands out for sure. And I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field.
Who do you think joins Stringer out there for that first snap against Nichols?
Stephen Catledge. I think for sure it'll be him. I think he and Jordan Stringer make up a really good duo. You know, last year, Stringer and Brendan Jackson were really, really good together. Brendan Jackson was living in the backfield. And Catledge is a lot bigger. Maybe doesn't have quite the speed that Brendan Jackson had. But I think those two together, especially against the run, that's going to be a really cool thing to watch those two.
Well, moving over to the defensive backfield, they returned their second leading tackler from a year ago in Justin Powell and Devin Lafayette. The duo all had 94 tackles a year ago. They lose Demaje Yancey to graduation, L.J. Green and Ian Connolly Goodley to the transfer portal. And they also bring in 4 transfers from this room, including 2 from the Power 4. What should we expect from this defensive backfield in 2025?
And it kind of feels like deja vu. You know, last year we were talking about, replacing practically the entire defensive backfield. And this year, there's so many guys that were here last year that are gone. You know, even during spring, L.J. Green, who was a starting corner last year, entered the portal. And I think I saw earlier that maybe he went to Tulane. Having Devin Lafayette, who will play mainly at the spear, is big. Having Justin Poe, who's a guy who was a walk-on and now is a scholarship kid and was a starter last year, is really big getting that guy back. But I think the corners, we're probably going to see obviously 2 completely new guys, the transfers in, that will mainly get the burn there. Levine from Missouri State was out of all the defensive backs, he and David Daniel-Cisbana were the ones that really stood out. And Cisbana, I kind of feel like he'll be a guy that he can play spear, but I think he'll probably start at safety. So those were the guys that really, really stood out to me for sure.
Who do you think can take that next step, take their game to the next level for the secondary group in 2025?
Levine is the one that continues to stand out to me. He's a guy that, obviously he didn't play here last year, but watching his film, he looked good at Missouri State. It's just he was constantly making plays during the spring, and I kind of feel like he's one that can step out this year. And Justin Poe, I think being a leader back there will be big.
Well, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I'm gonna say Stephen Catledge. I think he's gonna have a really big year, and just the size, the toughness. I really feel like if he could stay healthy, he'll have a really big year at linebacker.
All right, well, let's move over to the special teams. And how is that special teams unit looking? And are there any concerns?
The biggest concern, it was the same concern that they had during last spring, is Colton Walls, who is the starting long snapper, plays baseball. So he couldn't play during the spring, and so snaps aren't as crisp, and that definitely hurts you for sure, not getting to get that work in. But other than that, I feel like that's a strong spot. I think kicker is really strong. They have Scott Taylor Renfro is a Troy kid. He's coming back. I think he may have tied the PAT record last year. But they have another kid from Ireland. I can't remember his name right now. I think during T-Day, he hit like 40 yarders in a row.
Oh, wow.
So he'll be cool to see. And then kick returner, punt returner. I'm going to be interested to see how that goes. Jawan Boyd and I believe it was Trey Taylor were returning punts mainly, and both of those guys are just, they're crazy with the ball in their hands. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Now that the spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into the 2025 season?
Running back would probably, I would say, kind of head and shoulders above everything else. That would be the most concerning, just because of the lack of depth. Yeah, that would be by far. On defense, like I said, I think they're as deep as I've seen at Troy, at least in the last 4 or 5 years. I guess just out of experience, corner, but I don't think that's going to be a liability.
Well, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how has it changed Troy's recruiting philosophy?
Oh, man. I think it's changed everybody's recruiting philosophy out of the G5. I know for sure JUCO is a place that they feel like they can find some gold in there, and I think that's one of the things they really, really have gone after. Both years that Jared Parker was here, and they also did it when Summerall was here. So I don't know if I would even call that a change. It's just definitely been a gold mine for Troy. But I think right now, with the way some of the JUCO guys in the past that maybe would have ended up at a Georgia or Alabama or USC, there may be not a spot for those guys now because of the 3,000 kids that are in the transfer portal. And I think that's where teams like Troy can really, really luck out. I think Troy recruits the transfer portal differently than I think we're seeing the Power 4 schools do it now. Power 4 schools, the way they seem to be recruiting now is looking for depth as much as anything else out of the transfer portal. And used to, the only time you were looking for a transfer is if you were looking for an instant impact, a starter right away. And I think that's kind of how Troy looks at it now. They're going to take somebody out of the portal. For the most part, it's probably going to be a guy they feel like they can play right now, not someone you want to develop. And on the flip side, the Power 4 guys are just, here's $200,000, come over here and be a third string tackle or whatever. So it's changed everything.
Well, what do you think is the main strength of this team heading into the 2025 season?
Offensive line, and I would say the defensive line / the bandit edge guys. I think the trenches are going to be where Troy wins or loses this year. And I think having those guys as strong and as deep as they are this year will pay dividends for Troy this year.
What does success look like for the Trojans in 2025?
I would say success would be back in the Sun Belt Championship game. I think that's how everyone has to look at it. Obviously, getting back to a bowl game is big. You want to have a winning record, but I think 2 years in a row Sun Belt champions, and then having the rough year that they had last year with all the turnover and all the injuries and all that stuff. Getting back to the Sun Belt Championship, I think, is kind of the big lofty goal that they're looking at right now.
Well, Josh, we've kind of made it all the way around: special teams, defense, offense. Is there anything else that you want to share? I think we should know about this 2025 Troy Trojans football team.
Yeah, these guys seem like a really tight-knit group. Just talking to them, being able to watch them around each other, and just hearing the coaches talk and the way that they're kind of approaching things. I know fans can get, for sure, a little bit maybe a little bit short-sighted sometimes, impatient. But I really feel like this has the potential to be a really big year for Troy, a really kind of a bounce-back year. Where at the end of the year last year, we really turn it around then. There was a little bit of a winning streak going. They were obviously playing much better and were hanging with everybody they played with, even when they lost. So I feel like I said, I think this has the potential to be a really, really good year for the Troy fans.
Well, Josh, we want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
All right, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your time and support. And until the next time, we are the G55.
1, 2, 3, 4. Here's to the school we love. We're coming home.